Hello and welcome to my channel. Now, today I'm going to talk about the second part of my story, losing a child. Now, you would think that it all started with losing Nela, but actually it all started much sooner. You know, when I was in the mid of my 20s and I was deciding to have a family and to get married with my current partner, now husband, of course, I felt reluctant to have a family. Somehow, I didn't want to have children. Not because I didn't like children. On contrary, I love children. But because I had this inner feeling that something will go wrong, that I'm going to experience something that is not going to be quite okay with my children. And I thought, wow, having healthy and beautiful children is like a lottery. It's like a lottery. Well, I thought, I thought this is crazy talk. I am crazy because I was talking to myself and I had this, I was reading Louise Hay at the time. So I thought, okay, my thoughts attract whatever is going to happen in my life. So I decided to be positive and, start to think different thoughts. However, well, I got married and 6 months later I got pregnant. And when I was 6 months into the pregnancy, my doctor on the regular checkup, she saw a tumor inside of my baby's heart. Yeah, it's not Nela, it wasn't Nela, it was Jean. He had a tumor inside of his heart. And I was only 6 months pregnant. And I thought, oh my God, what is now? What is going to happen? And all those feelings that I had, concerning about my babies, about my children, they all rushed forward. And in one day, the next day, this doctor scheduled me to a specialist appointment. So I got to this in the morning at 8 o'clock. I was at the specialist in Maribor, and he was like examining me and my baby, and he was on the phone talking to another specialist in Ljubljana, so on the opposite side of the country. And he was like, "Can you go there? Because in my practice," and please, he was an old doctor, "I haven't seen something like that. Like baby, 6 months pregnant, so it's an infant boy, he had a tumor inside of his heart." I felt like my world crashed. I didn't know how to cope with this feeling. I was so in fear. I wasn't like in grief, or I wasn't sad. I was in deep, tremendous fear. And that fear was because I didn't know what will happen. I didn't know how to cope with the unknown. And that is the biggest issue that I had at the time, how to cope with the unknown. So we got to another specialist in Ljubljana, like in 3-4 hours. They were already waiting for us there. And with this cardiologist, there was a neurologist accompanying him because he invited her. Because according to his knowledge, Jean wouldn't have just one tumor in his heart, but probably he will develop tumors in the brains, in kidneys, or in other organs. And I didn't know that at the time. Thank God I didn't know that at the time. But I was wondering why this neurologist was there with him. So she was like explaining me that perhaps my baby would have seizures, but they can all solve it out with some medicine and blah, blah, blah. But I was so stubborn inside of me because I wanted to know what I am coping with. So I kept asking, what is the worst thing that can happen to my child? What is it? And she kept repeating, well, she can have these seizures, but it is okay because we can sort it out with some medicine and blah, blah, blah. But I kept asking this same question. What is the worst thing that can happen to my child? Because I didn't know, being in the state of fear, not knowing what you're coping with, is the worst feeling in the world, because you feel so helpless. You cannot deal with something that you don't know what is it. It's like being in the darkness and you don't know what is hiding in the darkness. You can't see, and you don't know whether it is good, whether it is bad, whether are you going to survive or not survive, because there is nothing you can cope with, nothing you can see. You can say, okay, this is what I can do, this is something, at least something that I can do, or you can just die, whatever. But you have to know what you are coping with. And I wanted to know what I'm coping with. And then she was a little bit angry because I was so persistent, and she said to me that, your child can be mentally and physically disabled, really heavy disabled. And I was like, oh my God, this won't happen. This won't happen to me. This won't happen to Jean. I knew that. And this was this strong feeling that rushed through my body and told me, oh no, this won't happen. It's like a relief. I really felt a relief because I really knew this won't happen. I know because everybody was expecting this, but I knew this won't happen. And I felt relief. And after that, I did have regular checkups in Ljubljana, and I had to get a birth in Ljubljana because otherwise they would transfer my baby and me after the birth there. So it was less complicated if I give birth in Ljubljana, and we were already there. So to sum things up, what was that feeling? That deep knowing that this won't happen, because my baby is not going to be disabled in any way. I just knew that because I was expecting something inside of me was something else. I didn't identify it at the time. And I was relieved because I kept thinking this thought, oh my God, thank God, now I went through this hard thing with my child, so I'm solved. I can have another child, I can have children, and everything will be okay. And that was my thought. When later I got pregnant with Nela and Nela was born, I thought, okay, she's going to be okay, nothing is going to happen, because I already experienced this lesson with my first child. Now you probably wonder what happened to Jean. Jean got born in Ljubljana in the hot summer day, and that night was starting to rain. It was like a relief because it was really hot. He was born on 31st of May, and that whole week, or I think it was like 2-3 weeks, were really, really, really hot. And that night started to rain, and it was like a relief because it was a little bit a chill that night. I felt instantly connected with him. I loved him so much already when he was in my womb. And then when I gave birth to him, I didn't feel like giving birth, like being exhausted or like it was heavy or whatever. I felt so much energy. He was born in the morning, like 3:40 in the morning, something like that. Of course, I was awake all night, but I felt so much energy when I gave birth to him. My husband was there with me, and he was like, oh, he could barely breathe and watch, and he was so sleepy. And I was like, how come you're so sleepy? Because I am so full of energy. Don't you see? We have a child, and I felt so connected with him, and I wasn't tired at all. I did have one crash down, and that was like 2 or 3 days after, I think 2 days or 1 day after he was born, because immediately after he was born, they all, all the checkups. Immediately after he was born, they proceed some basic basic checkups of his organs and his brain and of course his heart. And I was so scared that they would find something, not in the heart, because I already know that he had a tumor in his heart, but in the brains or somewhere else. And that one evening I went out on a hallway and I cried so much. I cried my eyes out because I was so scared about him. Because all the time I was holding on to that feeling, this won't happen because he won't be disabled, because I knew that this was such a clear feeling. But that night, that evening, I got so scared. So I didn't cry in the room because there were two more moms in the room. I went outside on the hallway and I cried my eyes out because I was so scared of my child, of my baby. But that was just one time. It turned out that we had regular checkups in Ljubljana. They were monitoring his heart and his heart condition and his tumor condition. In 2 or 3 years, his tumor was gone. It disappeared. He is normal child. At the year of 6, they gave him pacemaker because of his heart issues, but they are not really big heart issues because this pacemaker is only working like 1% up until now. I don't know what will happen, but John is normal, beautiful child, and I think that everything went well. So this was it about Jean, but this inner feeling that something will go wrong with my child was correct, because it wasn't just feeling that you can attract something in your life, but it was this deep knowing, like this will happen. I knew that deep inside that something will happen. So when this happened with Jean, I thought, yes, good, now I'm relieved. Everything is okay. I'm not going to experience anything else with my child. Oh my God, I was wrong. Diagnoses were chickenpox with leukemia, and this is a deadly combination. It was December, Christmas time, happy time, and I wasn't happy. I was so scared of her, and I was in the hospital with her. She went to the hospital on 6th of December. And on the 30th of December, she was already dead. Padre ottimo. Okay. To se odrežimo. So on the 8th of, when Nella was like 2.5 years old, she kept asking me to have another baby. And I wasn't prepared for another baby, although I knew I'm probably going to have a third child. Somehow I knew that, but I wasn't prepared for that. So when she got 3 years, when she was 3 years old, we got her this baby with a lot of functions, so that she was really happy about it. But you know what she did? She saw this baby doll and she came to me and said, "Mom, do you know what a real baby is? Because I want a real baby." And I was like, yes, well, we'll see. Well, 2 months later, she got sick. First, she got chickenpox, and 3 weeks later, this strange fever. And this fever kept repeating and repeating for days. So we went to the doctor with her, and the diagnosis were chickenpox with leukemia. It was a deadly combination. So we went to the hospital and they started treatment for leukemia, and they were easing her chickenpox virus, and they were dealing with this chickenpox virus. However, all the time she stayed there. She was so calm, so good, such a good girl. She was so, like, she was really thinking it. I was really thinking, this is a adult child. This is not a 3-year-old child, because she was so peaceful. She was really thinking about me, looking at me, and she was not a demanding child. And I was there asking her, Nila, would you like to go home? What do you want to do when we get home? And she was like, that's it. And I knew that she knew she's not going to get home anymore. She's not going to go home anymore. And this was so scary feeling for me, because I knew that. And there was another thing. I was trying to get to this feeling of knowing she will be okay, as I did with Jean. And I couldn't get to that feeling. I kept persuading myself. I kept thinking she will be okay. She will be okay. And I kept telling she will be okay. She cannot die, because dying seems impossible. But all she kept saying was, Mom, I want another child. It was December, it was holidays, it was Christmas when we were in the hospital. And I kept asking her, what do you want for a present? And she kept receiving all those presents in the hospital. But she didn't allow me to open them. A 3 years old child didn't allow me to open her presents. And I was just piling them up in the corner of the room and wondering, why don't you want this presents? Because you are a child. And she was like, Mom, all I want is another baby. I want you to have another baby. And I was like almost crying, because I was so scared of her. And I didn't understand her. I didn't understand a 3-year-old child just asking me for a baby instead of the presents, instead of the dolls and everything that she would play with. And she didn't want to play. She didn't want to play with anything. She was really serious. And that Thursday evening, when the water was starting to accumulate in her lungs, and I was so desperately scared about her, and we were there with her, with my husband, I promised her. I said, Nila, I will do my best. I will do whatever it is in my power to give you this baby, but please, please, would you please be okay? And then she looked at her father and she said, Dad, I love you. And then she looked at me and she just said, Mom, just hold my hand and don't leave me. And I just hold her hand, and I accompanied her into the operating room, because then they give her a sedative. So she was sedated so that they could pump her the fluid out of her lungs. And that was the last time I spoke to her. Because during the night I wasn't allowed to be there with her. She was still sedated, and she was like not being conscious anymore. And in the morning, when I was waiting for the hour to get to her, they called me half an hour earlier and they said, please come to the emergency room because something is wrong with your daughter. And when I got there, I just sat in the chair and I get to watch how the doctors were all trying to get her heart beating again, because her heart stopped beating, and they were pumping her hard, and I get to watch them, and I watched the tears in their eyes, and I was so calm, and I didn't understand myself, because I knew there, when I was sitting and watching, that it is hopeless, that she's already gone, that she decided to leave. So in a few minutes, I don't know about the time, later I went to her, hold her hand, stroke her on the hair, and I told her how much I love her, how much I respect her path, that if she chooses this to be her path, if she chooses to leave me, to go and to end this life, it's okay, because I love her so much. I don't want her to suffer. I don't want her to be in pain anymore. Oh my God. It was so hard, you know, and while I was talking to her and telling her how much I loved her, how much her dad loves her, and Jean and everybody loves her, and that she would never, ever, ever, ever doubt that we love her. And while I was sitting there, I get to watch this or hear this, her sound of heart beating slower and slower and slower, until I heard that notorious beep. It's like a movie. It's like I was in a movie, and when that beep was, I was there watching all that. And I felt so calm. I didn't understand myself. It was hard, but I didn't understand myself. I was like centered and calm, and I think that she already was watching over me with her energy, and she was like, I don't know, it's like I was in a different space. I don't know. However, this is the end of the second part of the story, because you would think that it all ends with that, but actually it didn't. Because later, Neela started communicating with me, and it was a miracle. I thought it was a miracle. I thought I was crazy, but then I realized how often people experience those miracles, how often people experience communication, but they're so afraid of talking about it, and they're so afraid that people will think they're crazy, or they're holding on to their child or their beloved one who has passed on. Let's end for today. In the next video, I'm going to share my journey through grief, and I'm going to share how all this continued. So thank you, and I love you. And if you're going through something like that on your own, if you are having a child who is very seriously sick, I know what you're going through. I know this is the hardest time in your life, because you're not just facing the possibility of losing your child, but you're facing all this possible pain and all these emotions that you don't allow yourself, and you're just on the surviving mode and supporting mode, and you're just a tiny, tiny, tiny little step away from crashing and just giving up. I know that. So I'm here to support you, and you know, at the end, it will also sort out one way or another. I know it is a scary feeling, but the best thing you can do for your child or your beloved one is to allow him or her his own path. And if that means leaving this earth, it's okay, because the bond and the connection between you will never, ever, ever end, and cannot be broken. It is different, it is hard, but it's never going to be broken. And that is what I want you to have in mind. You will always stay connected, and your beloved one or your child will always be the part of your life. This is something that even death cannot cut. So thank you for watching. I love you. Bye.